What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to another video. This video is going to be rather similar to the one I've already made 2-3 weeks ago, and the video was called How to Use Python for MySQL. In this video we're going to change things up a little bit, and we're going to switch our preferred language of choice from Python to Java. So let's get going here. So what I'm going to do is create a new project in Intellij, and this is going to be a Gradle project. So on this page I'm not going to change anything. The group ID I'm going to give it is Java SQL version 1. Next, use auto imports, create directories. Next, new window. Okay, here's my project. Let me resize that a little bit. So there's the project that Gradle built for me. Now there are two dependencies that I want to use in this project, and one of those dependencies is JSON, and this is just regular JSON dependency, and I'll talk a little bit more about how you get those dependencies and where you can locate them. But basically we're gonna paste that line of code into our dependencies in build.gradle, and then one more dependencies is the SQL connector, so we'll paste that in. Now there's one more thing that we need to do inside our build.gradle file, and that is we need a build script. So we're going to go ahead and create a build script. Now the problem with the build script is you have to specify your repos one more time inside here. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to specify the dependencies one more time here as well, but we only need one dependency in this case. We only need the MySQL connector, and it should not be compiled in this case, and instead it should be put into the class path. So at this point our build.gradle is complete, and I promised you I'll talk about how you get these dependencies here, or how you know that this is what you need. So there's a resource online. If you go to mvnrepository.com, you can search for libraries for JSON like I did right here, and the one we needed is org.json. This is probably the most widely used library out there. Another one that's pretty common is this JSON.simple, but in our case this is the one we need. So if you click on this, the one I'm using is actually from 2016, February 12. So here you can choose like whichever build system you're using. I'm using Gradle, so I'm going to Gradle and just copying this this line and pasting it into my file. Same thing you can do with MySQL connector, and this is the one that I used. And as far as the version goes, I'm using the 5.1.38. So same thing, go in, find Gradle, copy the line, paste it into your project. So as far as that goes, we're done. Let me find my project. All right, so at this point we can start writing code. So let's go to our Java directory here, and let's create our main class first and get the easy stuff out of the way. And this is going to be public static void main. So we'll just leave that class like this for now, and we're gonna go and create a second class, and this second class we're gonna call Mysqldb, kind of to stay in the theme with Python here. Now we need a couple of variables, and those variables are going to be private. The first variable that we're going to create is going to hold our connection. So we're going to say private connection java.sql, and we'll name it connection. Now the other three variables are going to be holding our credentials that we're going to be using to log into our database. So those we can declare final because they will not change after declaration. So we're going to say private final string user name, and we're going to do the same thing for password and the database host. Now that this is done, we can go ahead and create MySQL. Let's make it public. Public MySQL constructor that we're going to use to pass in the database credentials. So the arguments it's going to take are host, username, and password. Now this is where we're going to kind of load up our JDBC driver, and the way it's done is a little bit different from all of the other imports. So we're going to say class for name, and then we're going to reference the package for the driver, which is com.mysql.jdbc driver. And we need to create new instance of that driver, and then let's add the exception to method signature, and there's a lot of them. Now next we can go ahead and assign our host, our username, and the password to our variables. Now next we're going to create, actually this is going to be a private method. This method is going to connect or initialize connection and update the connection variable in our class. So this is actually not going to return anything, but rather update the variable. So this is going to be private void. We're going to call this method connect. No arguments for this method. And like I said, it's going to update the connection variable. So we're going to say connection equals driver manager get connection. This is where we pass our host, our username, and our password, like so. Add that to exception signature, or the exception to method signature. And then what I like to do, I kind of like to run a double check. Like when I establish connection to something, I want to make sure I'm actually connected. So I'm gonna do a check if I am connected, or if connection is not closed, then I'm gonna do just a simple sysout to let me know that connection connected successfully. And then else, if we did not connect successfully, we'll just throw a runtime exception that's gonna say, let's use string format here. As a matter of fact, it's gonna be a little bit better. So here we're gonna do host, user, name, and password. And in here we're gonna say failed to connect to the database. And here we're gonna give the database with user as such and pass as such. So basically what this is going to do is, if we connected here, it's going to print out connected successfully. If we fail to connect, it's going to throw an exception, and it's going to say fail to connect to database under this host with user such and password such. So next method that we need to do is going to disconnect. So if we connect, we need to make sure that we can disconnect as well. And this is also going to be a private method. It's also not going to return anything, and it's going to be called disconnect. And here we're gonna do similar check if connection is not closed, then we're gonna do something else. Let's just do print. Oh, we don't really have to do anything at that point. If it's closed, it's closed. Then we're gonna do connection, and we're gonna call close method on that connection. And then here we're going to do similar thing where we're gonna double check whether the connection is closed. Okay. Connection closed. And now let's handle this exceptions, add it to method signature. And over here, fail to disconnect from the database, blah, blah. Okay. That's good enough. Now let's create a method that's going to run. This method is going to run our query. And this is going to be a tricky one because the way we're going to be parsing results is going to be a little bit different than how maybe other people do it. But this is going to be a public method, and it's going to return JSON array. That's why we needed that JSON dependency for the JSON array data type. So we're going to call this method run query, and it's going to take one argument, and that argument is going to be the query. Okay, so one thing we can do at the beginning here, we can actually do sysoutprint of the query just for debugging purposes. So I'm going to say query equals to that. And here we're gonna wrap this whole thing into try and finally, just like we did in Python. And the only reason we need finally is to disconnect, really, that's it. And in try block we are going to connect. Then we need to make sure that we process our query as well, so that's the next step. So we're gonna say prepare statement. Let's see, prepare statement equals connection dot prepare statement, and we're gonna pass our query down into this method and add this to the method signature. What's this? I guess this is the wrong type. Let me do this. Let's remove that. No? Okay. Just do it this way. Imported the wrong type. So, alright. So we need java.sql prepare statement instead of the com.mysql.jdbc prepare statement. So now we can execute our statement and we can return it. One thing we haven't done, and we'll do it after this, but this right now is not going to work. So we're gonna execute query, but this is not gonna return JSON array. So that's why we have this red underline. So now we're going to create a method that's going to parse our result set into a JSON array. And I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm just going to copy the method from my other project because it's pretty long and it's going to take me a while to write it out. But this is how it's going to look. Let's see. So this actually does not like the fact we're using. Actually, no, we are using Lambda 8. What's the problem then? Usage of API documents, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. So, public static JSON array convert. So this is the method that's going to convert our result set to a JSON array. And basically what we do here is we pass the result set into this method, and then we check if result set is actually there. Then we're going to proceed to converting it. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the metadata for those results. The metadata will contain column names and column types, which we will need over here. And then we're gonna figure out how many columns we have, because for each result in the results we will need to go through each column and get the column name and the column data type. And the reason we need column data type is to figure out, kind of right here is where we figuring out like whether the data type is an integer or varchar. And if it's a varchar, then we're going to be using getString method on the results, and if it's an integer, we're going to be using getInt method. And then of course we need the column name to make sure we're referencing the right column. So now if we go back to our run query, we're going to change it a little bit, and we're going to return mysqldb convert, and we're just going to convert statement.execute query, because .execute query returns a result set, and result set is what we need to pass into our convert method. So there we go, we got our stuff. Now there's one problem though with this class in its current state. If we leave it as is right now, we're not going to be able to execute any queries that do something with the data. So if we want to insert new stuff, if we want to change the data, we're not going to be able to do that with this. Basically, that is because the execute query does not allow any data manipulation statements to be passed to it. So if you want to actually do data manipulation, we need to add one more method in here, and it's going to be very similar to this. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in here. It's not actually going to return anything, so we can change return type to void, and let's change the name of it. Let's call it run update, and here we don't need return, and we don't need to convert it because there is nothing that's going to be returned. So execute update is the method then that we want to call on our statement. Now that will update the records in the database. Oh, okay, now we're done. Now we can go to our main class and actually do some experiments, see if what we wrote actually works. So what we're gonna do is gonna declare mysqldb object. We'll just call it SQL. Oh, let's call it mysqldb equals new mysqldb. Now this is where we need to pass in our credentials. And there's one difference with the way you pass in credentials. With Python, you can just type in the host IP, which, by the way, if you followed my videos on creating the database, then you can find the your host IP is basically going to be this. So if you type ifconfig, this will pop up, and this is what your address is going to be for the database. Also, there's another way you can check it. Well, you kind of need to make sure that this address is actually in your MySQL config. So for me, if I do cat etc mysql conf, so this is where my binding address is, and it should be, you know, for my, if I'm running this on my local network, then this is the IP that I'm interested in. Your IP may actually be a little bit different, so you know it's not going to be one-to-one. And then this is my port. So this is how I know like my host. And the username is when you were creating a user, that's what you're going to be passing as your username and the password in here. But there's actually one difference from Python and Java, how you specify the host. In Java, we want to say we want to specify the protocols that we're going to be using. So we're going to be using JDBC, and we're going to be using MySQL. And then after that, we're going to follow with our IP, which is for me, for you it's going to be different, but for me it's 10.0.0.131, and port is to 3306. Now here, I can also, similar to Python, I can specify my database that I want to use, and the way I can do that is through /, and then I can give the database name. So I'm going to be using database QA, and now I'm going to specify my user, which is Arthur, and my password is pass, if I recall correctly. Now this will throw an exception, so we need to add all those exceptions to our method signature. And at this point we can go ahead and create a variable to hold our results, and then we're going to use our SQL to run a query, and this is just going to be a very simple query. We're going to say select all from QA.result, and actually, because I specified QA database here, I don't really have to specify it here, so even if I remove this, it's still gonna work. Alright, and then let's just do a for loop to print out the results. Remember that this is a JSON array, so we can do a for loop on it, no problem. So I'm going to say object result, and then I'm going to do sysout with the result. So let's see what happens. Let's run this and see what happens. All right, there we go. So this is all of the entries that we have in our database right now, and this is kind of looks similar to the example I did with Python as well. So let's actually run our other method, like mysql.run update, and I'm gonna go ahead and copy the query that I used in the Python script here and just paste it in here like so. And what this is going to do, it's going to insert new data into the database. So I can actually like change test suite to 2, test name to 2. If you look at the results so far, there is nothing with test name 2 in here. It's all test name 1 and test suite 1. And so let's run this and see what happens. Alright, so now we see entry here with test suite 2 and test name 2. And if you continue executing this, it's just going to continue adding new records to the database and returning those records with the next statement. So that's it, guys. That's how you use Java for MySQL. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and share. Take care, guys.